All right. Well, I'm sure you know about Crystal Paine. If you don't, where have you been? Because Crystal's amazing, dear friend, incredible influencer, incredible author. You know her probably as the money saving mom. She has helped so many moms save incredible amounts of money just with her expertise and her wisdom and just being real and raw about what goes on in her life. So she has launched a new book, Love Centered Parenting. And the story behind this is such a beautiful one. And as usual, and here at the Crazy Blessed podcast, it is one where God's blessing always comes through in an incredible, crazy way. So, Crystal, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my goodness, it is such a blessing. I always am blessed with, I know we've had a couple of interviews in the past, and just it's just always been such a blessing to know you over the years and see how God has worked through your platform and helping really transform the lives of people and provide hope when you think that no one understands what I'm going through. This is so hard. And you've been known as a money saving mom, but I mean, up until recently, something happened in your life, in your family's life, that puts you on a new path, and God gave you a message to give to the world. Could you share? I know you've always been like so real, is so raw and so open. So I appreciate you sharing about this story, but could you share what happened that kind of where God was able to speak to you so eventually you would be able to have this message?
Yes. Well, I never, ever, ever thought I would be writing a book on parenting. In fact, that was kind of one of those things where I was like, that is the last topic I will ever talk on. Ask me in 25 years, and my kids are all grown and gone. But here we are. So about 4 years ago, my husband went to school drop off one day, and he dropped our 3 older kids off for school. And the principal met him and said, I need to meet with you and your wife and your child after school. And that is never a good thing. And so he came home and he told me this, and he said, I don't know what it's about. And I'm like, I don't know what it's about either. And we just had that gut feeling that something really bad was about to go down. And so all day long, we're just wondering, what is it going to be? And so we go in there and we meet with him, and he shows us and tells us about some pretty severe things that had happened the day before that break the school's code of conduct that we just were blindsided by. Had no idea. And as we were then uncovering more things, found out that over the past number of months, there had been a lot of stuff that had gone down, and parents had gone to the principal, parents had been talking amongst themselves, and our child was really, really struggling, and we just hadn't seen the warning signs. And our child was then asked to leave school, and just kind of then spiraled out and got into a really bad place. There was a lot of just lashing out and anger and vitriolic language. And then it turned into depression and anxiety and then suicidal stuff. And we just felt desperate and at our wits' end because there's just so much there, and you want to help your child, but what do you do? And we're trying to get our child in with some counselors, and we called some different places, and all of them either were completely full or they said, I'm sorry, we don't take a child with that severe of a situation. And so it's just a very scary and just devastating, and then just time where you just felt so desperate to, how do I help my child? I don't know.
Wow, so much there. And you mentioned about being in the emergency room and how that was a pivotal point for you. Can you share that?
Yes. So one of the counselors that we called, they said, after you've described what you've told us, this is something that you need to go straight to the emergency room because your child is suicidal. And that is just, as a parent, to walk into the emergency room. I talk about this in Love Centered Parenting, about just walking in and saying, my child's suicidal. Like, you can barely get the words out, and you just feel this kind of like cloud of shame that you've done something really wrong to get to this place. And you don't even really want to look up at them because you're just you just so much shame. But it was through that. It was they took our child in, and then they have to take all their clothes, take their shoes, take just everything away from them. And then they give them this gown, and then they go through this whole process. And it's it feels kind of demoralizing. And I understand why they do all the things, but still, as a parent, to see your child going through this, and we were kind of not allowed to, do a lot because they don't know the situation and they're trying to figure that out. But it was in that moment that God just really met me. And I just felt, even though it's like that moment of desperation, I also felt like I don't have anywhere else to turn, and I just have God. And so he was so faithful to meet me there, and just to feel his presence, that he was with me and that he had not left me even in that dark pit that we were in.
Wow. Wow. And you talk about hearing that clear message, you're loved, like in the middle of all this, this cloud of shame, this confusion. I'm sure like that deep, dark confusion was just so prevalent at that moment. And you heard this clear message regarding love. And like that was what began this whole journey. And what does it mean to be love centered when you're parenting? And how did that change how you moved forward? Like we talk about rules-based parenting and relationship-based parenting, and I think so many people, I mean, we have this as a mom. Our kids are everything, like we want to do right by our kids, like do whatever to me, but don't touch my kid. Like we have that mama bear instinct. And so when we see one of our kids hurting or confused or in that dark place, immediately you're like, how do I help them? What do I do? And instead of going to that action, God went straight to your heart and he directed you in that way. How did that change things for you?
Yes. So we were able to get our child in with a therapist. And I remember the first meeting, we went in for our initial kind of consult with the therapist before our child had the sessions. And my husband and I are sitting across from the therapist on this couch. And I look at the therapist and I said, I just want to do whatever it takes to help my child. And so if there is anything you can come up with that I have done or am doing that I can change to help, please let me know. Well, it was not just a few weeks later. The therapist calls me in after a session, had dismissed my child, calls me in, and she looked at me and she said, I think that you're trying so hard to fix your child. What would it look like to just walk with your child? And those words, even though at first I was like, what, but then I started paying attention over the next few days to my responses. And every single time when something was going wrong, my child wasn't doing the right thing, or just they were lashing out, or I was immediately going into fixer mode. And I was trying to, either saying, stop that, we don't do that, or just trying to redirect, and it was all about me just trying to fix. And I realized I was spending so much time correcting my child and very little time connecting with my child. And how so much of my interaction, which there was a ton of interaction, I was interacting with this child so much, but it was just this reactionary correcting and constantly saying, don't do that, you shouldn't do that, you're doing the wrong thing, or trying to fix it and say, let's talk about this, when you responded like this, blah, blah, blah. And instead, what would it look like to just step into their world and care about what they care about and be interested in what they're interested in? Because they have all these big feelings and they're crying out for me to pay attention. And I was paying attention, but it wasn't really in the way that would engage their heart.
That is so powerful, because we want to fix it and we immediately go to, what do I need to do? Like, that's just our brain, we just like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? This isn't right. And as a mom, I need to fix it. But we don't realize that what we're doing is we could be just debilitating our child from stepping into that power themselves and being the one who can be transformed. And it's so hard though, Crystal, to walk with our children through a hard time. It's like we have to like shove down that instinct, as the fixer, like you talk about, we have to like repress that so that we can just be so centered and present with our kid. And this changed things for your relationship.
Yeah. And so for me, as I was sitting in that and really analyzing, why am I trying so hard to fix things? Like, why is that my just knee-jerk response that I need to fix this? I need to control. I need to kind of bubble wrap and micromanage and protect my child. And I realized it went back to I cared more about my own reputation than I did about relationship with my kids. And so often when a child would do something that was, not great behavior or whatever, I would play it out in my head and I would think, well, if they're around other people and they're doing this, how this is going, and I'm playing it around, but it's always about what are other people going to think? What am I going to look like? And I didn't, obviously we're not going around thinking that in our head, but if we dig down deep, I realized it was about my reputation. I cared what other people thought. I wanted people to think that I was a good mom and had good kids. And it's interesting because when I was writing this book, I actually asked on Instagram, I'm The Money Saving Mom on Instagram, and I asked on my stories, I said, fill in the blank. My job as a parent is to blank. And I asked people to just give their response. And I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses, but I would say 98 to 99% of them were things that we don't ultimately have any control over. It was my job as a parent is to raise upstanding kids with good moral character who love Jesus. And I'm like, that's great, but guess what? You actually cannot do that. And as I was reading these responses, I thought, no wonder women are carrying around such a heavy weight. No wonder there's so much shame. No wonder there's this mom guilt. No wonder we feel so much like we're failing, because we think that our job is to do something that only God can ultimately do. And so in this process, I really had to go back to being reparented by God, because I realized that I cared about my reputation. I cared about raising good kids because I had so much insecurity. And that insecurity was really rooted in the fact that I didn't believe that I was fully and wholeheartedly loved by God. I thought I needed to do better, be a better mom, have good kids, kind of prove myself. I needed that affirmation from others and from God in order to give me the enoughness, that if I would do all that, then I would be enough. And so it was this 2-year process of me really replacing the lies that I believed about that I wasn't enough, that I needed to do more, that I needed to try harder, that I was a disappointment to the people closest to me, and replace that with the truth of who I am in Christ, and then to live out of that truth. And there's a really beautiful thing when we don't just know the truth, but we let the truth be what guides how we live our life. And that we then become a conduit of God's love to other people, and we can live as loved. And one of the chapters, I talk about this question that I heard on the Trim Healthy Mama podcast. One of their guests said, what would loved me do? How would loved me live? And I started asking that to myself. If I truly believed that I was fully and wholeheartedly loved by the creator of the universe, how would that change how I act? How would that change how I respond? And I realized that I was holding back so much because of my insecurity, because of my lack of belief in how much I was loved by God. And so to really rest in his love and to receive his love and then live out of that love in all relationships, but especially in my parenting, then I didn't have to worry if my kids make a mistake or make a bad choice or do something. I don't have to immediately go to, oh my goodness, I've failed as a mom and that is terrible. And what are people going to think? I could just be like, you know what? The reason we have Jesus is because we're going to make mistakes, and my child needs me to love them right now and walk with them. And I am loved by God, and it doesn't matter what other people think. And I can just stand confidently in his love for me, and just constantly then replacing those lies with the truth, replacing lies with truth, and just reframing and rewiring my brain so that I could love my kids. And I talk in the book how you can't give what you don't have. So if we want to love our kids well, but we don't believe that we are loved by the God of the universe, don't fully and wholeheartedly believe that and claim that and live out of that, we're never going to have what it takes to be able to love our kids well, because we don't have, that love that is flowing through us. We don't believe in that. We can't give what we don't have.
So true, Crystal. It's like we're operating in deficiency mode.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to do everything with nothing in the tank, because as believers, that's our source. That's our power source, is love. And God chose to make his home within us. And God is love. But it's so true what you're saying, how we subconsciously get programmed with these lies, and we don't even know they're lies. We see them, we live with them, we habitually, you know, rehearse it in our mind. And we think, okay, if I can just do this, I'll be good enough. If I can hit this mark, if my kids are like this, if my marriage looks like this, if I have this in my bank account, if I live this way. And all of a sudden, these become the way the Bible talks about those unjust scales. He despises unjust scales. And, back in that time when he was talking about unjust scales, people in the marketplace would like have these unjust scales that were like actually trickery. And it would be like, you wouldn't get enough for your money. And so of course it's like a lie, you're deceiving. And so when he talks about unjust scales, I think about how we're always trying to measure up, and that really is that unjust scale. It's like, what are you what are you measuring? Because you forgot about the one element that throws out the scale, and that's love. And that's the most powerful force. And if we can step into that love, it's so true. We can see the lies for what they are in the light of his love. And all of a sudden, we can realize that peace and that freedom that comes with truth. And the Bible says that the truth will make you free. So the understanding of his love and being able to like stay in that place of being loved, that's truly where the freedom and the peace comes from, knowing that he's doing the work. I'm just here so that he can do the work through me. It's not me, but it's that love in me that can flow out. And this totally transformed how you did parenting, operating out of that safe place, of love. Because when you're trying to walk on that high wire of rules-based parenting, and am I doing everything right? It's just oppressive. It's like you're white knuckling it through life when you do that. But when we can like let the scale go, let the measurement go. So you know what? I'm loved in the place of all this, in the place of all the confusion. I'm still loved. Nothing changed that. And when you operated out of that full capacity, now that was that sufficiency where God is exceedingly abundantly beyond everything you can think or hope or ask for. And that's where the power to truly love comes through. And you talk about how this love-centered parenting really changes how you communicate with your kids. So how did that transform? And how can you help people be able to communicate better with their kids when they realize that they're in that safe place of love?
Yes. And I think whenever it's no longer about our agenda, because so often how we parent, we're parenting for our agenda. It's either for our selfishness because we want our kids to just kind of don't rock the boat. When they're younger, it's like, we don't want them to make messes because we don't have to clean it up. If we really go to the root of why we're kind of trying to have them do all these things, a lot of times it's our selfishness or it's our pride because we care about what other people think of us. And so when those aren't our motivations for parenting, but it's really, God, I just want to love my child. I just want to walk with them and I want to love them. Then when they mess up, when they're making mistakes, when they're kind of going down a path that you're like, this is, I'm concerned about this, we can approach it in such a peaceful way. We don't have to freak out anymore. We don't have to carry that heavy weight of guilt of, oh no, my job performance is on the line. When we don't, no longer it's about, our job as a parent is to raise these perfect kids, but it's that our job is to love them. And I talk about the 4 choices that every parent, I encourage them to make, and that is to lean in and love, to listen well, to lead with humility, and to let go. We can just do those.
Time. That's so powerful. Just say that one more time, because I know people want to latch onto that. So yeah, please.
Lean in and love, listen well, lead with humility, and let go. And those are each a chapter in the book that I dive into deeply what this looks like. How do we walk this out? But it's this beautiful thing, because then when we see something that needs to be addressed with one of our kids, we're not instantly going to, well, let me fix this. Let me, get this all wrapped up with a bow and take care of this. But we can, I call it send up a flare prayer, asking God, like, if there's something that's going down, we're like, we need to address this. Send up a flare prayer to God saying, please help me. How do I walk with my child right now? What does it look like for me to lean in and love? And then to be able to address it out of that space of like, I want to lean in and love my child. So do they, maybe they just need to talk with me. Maybe they just need to, maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're tired. Sometimes it's like we're trying to fix something in the completely wrong way because we're missing the whole point. And a lot of times also it's that realizing that what's on the surface, there's so much more going underneath that we can't see. And so giving our child that space to, when they know that they're loved by us, just like how we feel safe with our Heavenly Father, and that we don't have to defend ourselves or our choices to other people, then when our child knows that they are fully loved by us, then it puts them, like, their shield goes down, their guard goes down. They don't have to be like, well, mom's just, out to ruin my life. And so just being able to just step into their world and be interested in what they're interested in, care about what they care about, and to ask them, hey, I saw this happen, and, just wondering, can we talk about that? I give an example in the book of one of my kids. I was cleaning up the kitchen and I found this note that they had written, and I looked at it. It was this nice note that they'd written to their friend, and then they'd used this crass word in it. And I just kind of flipped out at first. I was like, what on earth? Like, where? I've never heard my child. And then I'm thinking, oh my goodness, are they talking like that at school? Maybe they're leading a double life. Like we go into these worst case scenarios. Like they're trying to be this, they act like this is a great kid, but but instead of just jumping on it and being like, I'm sorry, we do not say this word, that is not okay, which 4 years ago I would have felt like I need to shut this down. Yeah. But instead I went to them and I said, hey, I saw this note that you wrote. This was really nice. I noticed that there was this word in there that you used, and can we talk about that? And they looked at me, they're like, what? And I was like, this word. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, do you know what that word means? And they're like, no. And like, they didn't even have a clue. They're just like, oh, I just heard some other adults use it. And I just thought and I was like, they used it correctly in the correct context, but it wasn't, we also had a conversation about don't you use words that you don't know what they mean. But, but it's the thing of like, had I just jumped on them and kind of lashed out at them about that, when it was like, they didn't even they weren't intentionally trying to do anything wrong. And so that's the thing, especially as my kids have gotten older, just instead of jumping to the sermon preaching, just leaning in and listening and, asking questions, leading with questions. Like if we'll get an email from a teacher that something went down, instead of being like, I got this email and I cannot believe, blah, 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 to say, hey, so I got an email today. Can you tell me more about this? And let them kind of process it with you and ask questions. How are you feeling about that? What do you think? And a lot of times I'll ask them, how do you think Jesus would respond in this situation? How do you think Jesus would want you to respond? And what can you learn from this situation? So they're kind of coming to these conclusions without me having to preach a big sermon, and they're processing it on their own. And that's really my goal. In the book subtitle is The No-Fail Guide to Launching Your Kids. And a lot of people are like, Crystal, you don't have kids who have launched yet. And I'm like, one, the no-fail guide, you can't fail when you're just loving your kids.
Yeah, not in love. There's no failure in love.
Not about the results. But then also launching your kids, it is a slow and gradual process. And it's not just, when they, are 18, bye, see ya. It's about, the day in and day out of raising adults, not kids. And so I want my kids to be dependent upon the Lord, not dependent upon me. And so how do I constantly point them to the Lord and point them to learn to process and grapple with things and make good decisions on their own versus me just preaching a sermon and telling them what they need to do? That is not preparing them for life.
That's so true. I think one of the elements that can best help us as moms is to develop a keen sense of curiosity. Like if we allow curiosity to direct our conversations instead of the sermon or instead of the condemnation or instead of the I need to fix it, if we just develop a keen sense of curiosity, it will those walls come down and you can have the conversations. You can know their heart better because you're not just dictating things, you're now open to receiving as well. And but before we wrap up, I think it's really important that you said you were blindsided by this. Like felt like it came out of nowhere. The last thing I want is for other women and men out there to be blindsided as well. So how do you know if your child's having a hard time? How do you know? Like you don't want to hear, no one wants to hear your child is suicidal.
Mhm.
How do you see it coming? How can you prevent it? What are some signs that you can go to so you can see, you know what, maybe I need to open this up. I need this needs attention.
Yes. And I think what I would just encourage all parents is, first off, you're not ever going to do it perfectly. That's why we have Jesus. And so to give yourself a boatload of grace, there's no system or formulaic. If you ask these three questions every day, you're never going to be blindsided, because parenting is a learning process. I'm right there in the trenches with you. But I think one of the things that I have learned is that I need to be a lot more connected with my kids. And so that looks like just really making sure that I am investing in their world and just asking them a lot more often, how are you doing? How was your day? And just like, but in a way of not like I'm expecting an answer, but just more like, I care about you. But I found that the best conversations that we have are when stepping into their world. And so often as parents, we can be like, well, I am not interested in what they're interested in. I mean, video games? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to sit there and do that. That's such a waste of time. But what does your child love? What lights them up? What are they passionate about? What do they get excited about? What do they want to talk about? What do they want to spend their time doing? How can you step into their world and be a part of that and show them that you really care? Because it's in those spaces that you're going to have the best conversations. And not even doing it thinking, well, I need to have a conversation with my kid, but just more like I want to connect with them and I want to hear their heart. And so letting them just open up as they feel comfortable doing that, the more that you're connecting with them, the more that they're probably going to be willing to do that. And so stepping into their world. And then also, I think it's just paying attention to, we just were really clueless about a lot of little things that were happening and not knowing that those were big signs of what's going on under the surface. And so paying attention to those little things. And I love Sissy Goff has a book that I highly, highly recommend, Raising Worry-Free Girls. Even if you don't have a girl, you have boys, it's still really, really helpful. And I think for any parent who they are struggling, with, I think my child's struggling with anxiety or depression or worry or suicidal, it's a really, really great resource to help you as parents to walk with your child and just to kind of open up some of those doors of conversation. And so I highly recommend that if you want just a resource to help you also know, like, how do we make sure that we don't get to this place? And then one more resource that I love is the Whole Brain Child. That one is really good at helping you to kind of see those signs, those warning signs, and then know how to respond. That one is not from a Christian perspective, but I still think it's got so much valuable information in it. So those are two great resources that I would recommend that every parent read, because I think that it just helps you as you walk with your kids to be aware, and then also to know when things get to a level that it is something that needs to be addressed by a professional, or maybe, just these simple tools can make a big difference.
Yeah. Sissy Goff was on the podcast recently. Amazing. So
Yes.
also go back to that great podcast on helping kids with anxiety. Brilliant, because so many kids are suffering with that right now in this weird time. But what was the other?
The Whole Brain Child. It's really, really fantastic of just helping you understand how their brain works and kind of what they're saying, what they're actually saying, and teaching them emotional language and that sort of thing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. What a blessing. thank you so much for sharing the story and for allowing it to serve so many other moms. And again, this is tell everyone where they can get more of you too, because you are such a blessing. But this is the Love-Centered Parenting book that Crystal has out, an incredible resource. But tell them where they can go and get more of you.
Yeah, so I would love for you to follow me on Instagram. I'm the Money Saving Mom on Instagram. I'm very, very active on Instagram stories. So if you want to see the behind the scenes of my life, get some just encouragement, ways to save money, but also just laugh. I love to make people laugh too. That is Instagram. And then also moneysavingmom.com is my site. Lots of deals and encouragement for ways to save money. And then also my podcast is called The Crystal Paine Show.
Beautiful. And Love-Centered Parenting. Make sure you get your hands on that. Crystal, thank you so much. And as usual, you have blessed this podcast like crazy. Thank you so much.